In this video, I'm going to show you how to use the brush tool with filter masking. I'm going to use the dehaze tool in this example. So let's go over to Add Filters. Let's type in DEH, and then we'll click on dehaze. And that's going to add it to our workspace. Now I'm going to drag this up a little bit so it's a little higher, and I'm going to go ahead and open it. So in this case, I want to dehaze the sky. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab the amount slider and I'm going to drag this up until I'm happy with how much dehaze has been applied to the sky. So now I'm going to go over and I'm going to click on the brush icon and choose brush. And you'll notice that that has given us some options here above the image on the left. So to show you how the mask tool works, I'm going to go ahead with the brush and paint in an area on the image. I'm going to click on the little eye here, which is the show mask, and you can see that that is the part that I just applied the masking to. Now, if I go to the mask drop-down menu and I choose fill, you'll notice that it fills the entire image. If I turn it back off, you'll see that that amount of dehaze has now been applied to the entire image. To show you that, I'm going to click on the little eye, which over here on the right, that turns off the filter, that turns it back on. So now I'm going to go to clear, and I'm going to clear that filter. I'm going to turn the show mask back on. So with it on, I'm going to paint a mask into the image. And to show you how invert works, if I select invert, it's now going to select everything but where I put the mask. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to clear. I'm going to paint the mask again. And under mask, if we click on copy, this gives us the ability to take this mask and paste it into another filter. If we go over to the right, let's say in golden hour, I click on the little drop down triangle next to it. I go down to mask and I click paste. And that's going to paste that mask into golden hour. So this is a way that we can take a mask and use it for multiple filters. We can also hide mask, and we can do that here, or we can do that here. Density has to do with blending the mask into the background better. The next thing we'll talk about is feathering. So essentially what this will do is feathering blurs or softens the edge of the mask. And so that takes care of the mask portion. Now, the brush itself is affected by the paint, erase. This has to do with the brush settings, and then you can affect size, softness, and opacity just by clicking on these, and you'll get these little drop downs that you can then use as sliders to work with. So paint's self-explanatory. With it on, when we drag across the image, it paints something. Erase will remove the mask. And depending on what size we have the brush, which is affected here, let's go to brush size and let's drag it down. And now we have a much smaller brush. And you can see as I move that through the mask, it's now only affecting an area the size of the brush. So now let's talk about the inner and outer rings on the brush and how softening and opacity affect how the brush applies the mask to the image. If you take a look at the brush on the screen, you'll notice there's an inner ring, an outer ring, and in the center there's a plus sign. If I go up and I click on erase, you'll notice that that is now changed to a minus sign. So this is a good visual indicator as to what mode you're in, either painting or erasing. Now the other thing that we can do, let me change it back to paint, is on the keyboard using the Alt key or the Option key, we can press that and we can change from plus to minus and continue using the brush without having to go back up to the paint or erase buttons. So now let's take a look at what softness and opacity do? We can change the softness setting by going up here, clicking on it, and we can drag the slider. We can do that same thing for opacity. If I click on the opacity, I now can drag the slider to the right and to the left. As we change softness from 100% to 0, the inner ring will get larger and finally extend all the way out to the outer ring, and so there would be just one ring. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to go ahead and click on the image and notice how that leaves a circle exactly the size of the brush with softness set at 0. Now if I go back up to softness and I set it to 100% and I click again, you'll see that is really softened how the brush applies the mask to the image. And let's try one more at 50%. And I'll click again. So that gives you an idea of how softness impacts how the brush applies the mask. I'm going to go ahead and clear the mask. If we look at opacity, and at 100%, softness at 50%, I'm going to click on the image. The opacity setting determines how much mask is going to be applied to the image each time you click and drag the brush over the image. So with softness set at 50% and opacity at 100, if I go ahead and click and drag, it's going to distribute that much mask onto the image. If I change the opacity to, say, 50%, and click and drag, it's just reduced how much masking has been applied, and the softness remains unchanged. So the best thing to do is to play with opacity and softness and brush size to learn how these controls will affect how your brush applies the mask to the image. So that's a basic introduction to masks, the options, and the brush.